Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mariela Salinas, and I am the Digital Marketing Specialist here at United Training. Welcome to today's webinar, Power Apps 101. This webinar will be recorded and shared with you via email, so we do encourage you to participate, but if you cannot, you will be getting a copy of this recording. Questions panel in your GoToWebinar dashboard, and if you have any questions, please save them for after the webinar. United Training is excited to bring you this webinar today. I'll now hand it over to you, Ryan.
All right, thank you very much. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Power Apps 101. So this will be a short, quick introduction to Power Apps and how it works. My name is Ryan, and I will be your facilitator for the day. So our agenda, we'll start with an introduction, a basic understanding of how Power Apps works. And then we'll do some quick demos of how to modify a SharePoint list form, and then how to build an app from scratch. So the first question you're going to want to ask is probably, what is and what are these Power Apps? So Power Apps is an O365 product that allows you to create apps to interact, enter, and edit data from multiple sources. The Canvas apps of Power Apps are no-code solutions, which is not really true because they use a type of Excel formula language to manipulate things, but in the way of using HTML or JavaScript, like that, there is no coding necessary for them. So at the most kind of fundamental level of Power Apps, what you do is you build canvases, and on these canvases you place objects, and how the objects look, behave, what information they show you, and all of that is controlled by the properties and the formulas you use to generate these properties. Now, for the most part, I have been talking just about a type of Power App called a Canvas app, and that's what most people think when they hear Power Apps. So if you've been seeing a demo of Power Apps or anything, you most of the time will think of a Canvas app. There's another type as well called a model-driven app, and the best way to kind of understand them is to think of a Canvas app like a canvas, and to think of a model-driven app like a puzzle, or like a model that you're putting together. Model-driven apps, their biggest knock is that they only accept one data source, and that is the Dataverse, or the Common Data Service. They do, however, if you use the Dataverse for it, they do allow for easy and quick model creation. So you don't have to build all the pieces, you simply set them up with the right data, the right tables, the right fields, and then the views and the forms, everything can generally be automatically generated. So you don't have to put it all together. It's like taking a puzzle, a Van Gogh puzzle, putting it together and saying, hey, look at this beautiful painting I have. It's a Van Gogh. You have no artistic capability, but you just put the pieces in place. A Canvas app is exactly what it sounds like. You start with a blank canvas, and you can build whatever you want. So this is why most people think of Canvas apps as what they're looking at. Canvas apps also allow for many more connections than the simple model-driven app Dataverse. So a Canvas app can connect to 300 plus different data sources. Primarily among them, you're going to find the ability to connect to SharePoint, to connect to Excel, connect to SQL, and even connect to the Dataverse. But that's not it. There are many, many others as well. The bad thing of Power Apps, Canvas apps, is simply the fact that you have to build everything. So if you want a screen with a form on it, you'll have to put the form on the screen, you'll have to configure the form, all the properties for the form, but on the flip side of that, you do have complete control over the look, the feel, and every other aspect of these Canvas apps. Now, for this presentation, because we only have 30 total minutes, we're not going to really talk more about model-driven apps. There's a whole host of other aspects to it with the Dataverse that you have to know, and so they're not as easy to kind of get started. There's something that would take a little bit more buy-in, a little bit more knowledge. Canvas apps, however, you can start with the simple SharePoint list. So that's what we'll continue on for the rest of the day. Now, when you build Canvas apps, you build them in a place called the Power Apps Studio. So what you're seeing on the screen here is a screenshot of the Power Apps Studio, and we'll be live in it in just a second, but you can see the different components of it. Now, at the top is a ribbon. So in the ribbon, you can go and find a variety of different commands and buttons that you're looking for. The big stuff here would be the Insert tab and the Settings button. Those are really the best places to kind of find here. Underneath the ribbon is the formula bar. And this basically sums up what a Power App is doing. You put things onto a page, and then every object has a whole host of properties. The color of it, so it's fill, what text is in it, what border does it have, what border type, what border color, what is the color of the font, what size is the font, a lot of properties. And every one of these properties can be set using either static data or a formula. So if I wanted something to be, white here, I can write, 255, 255, 255, 1, and get it to be white, or I could have written in the word white just as easily. To the right of the studio, you have the properties pane. So what we do with formulas in the formulas bar, you can oftentimes do quickly and easily on the properties pane with little drop-down selections or color pickers or things like that. So instead of having to set the fill using a formula that you might not know, you can come to the color picker and just select a color from the options in there, or type in an RGB color code and have it do things as well. So the properties pane is a great way to modify properties when they're not needing formulas specifically. On the left side, we have the tree view, where we see all of the objects on the screen. So you'll see all of the screens, and on the screens, you'll see the different objects. Each object has its own properties, and when you select them on the left side, you can see them on the screen. Objects can be invisible, and when they're invisible, you still see them in tree view. So tree view becomes really vital when you're trying to find specifically an object that might be behind something or currently invisible or anything like that. So you can find it over here and select it, even if you don't really know where it is on the page. Also, you'll see we're in tree view, this little space up here. If you go down to the data source, this is where you'll see your data connections. So you can connect to multiple different data sources if you want to, including local data sources that are called collections. Collections are the ability to collect data locally and store it inside the app. But you can make connections to SharePoint lists and libraries, into SQL or Excel or any of these other data sources. So we can see stuff there. So that's our interface. Let's actually go live into a Power App, and let's see what we're going to see here. So you open up Power Apps either from Office 365. So if you want to go into the Power Apps app, you can come here. You can then build standalone apps from here that look like this. If you want to modify a SharePoint form, you actually start from SharePoint. So in SharePoint, you can come to a list, and there'll be an integrate portion right here. And in there is Power Apps, and you'll see the ability to customize forms. So InfoPath used to be the standard for this. We're now switching to Power Apps. InfoPath is going to go away really soon. And so Power Apps needs to replace your InfoPath forms, and this is the easiest way to do it. In modern view, you can just go to integrate and say customize forms. The big difference between this and a standalone Canvas app is that the Canvas app doesn't have to be wedded to one specific list. I can open up this app just in the browser and do whatever I need to do inside of it. I don't have to go to a SharePoint site to get to it. If I modify a form, the only way to open up that form is to go to the SharePoint list and click New, or to select an item and click Edit or any such thing like that. So the ability to change and do things here is all going to be based off of opening up an item from SharePoint. So that's specifically what we would be able to do here. Now, when I open up and customize the form, this will bring up Power Apps. So when I do that, it will bring up Power Apps. You have to have the right permissions to be able to do this, but it will bring it up and I will be able to modify the form. So it opens it up and gets it ready. And when it finishes loading here, you'll see that it has the same studio that we previously saw for a standalone Canvas app. So we can see the objects right here. So on the left-hand side in Tree View, I can see that there are two screens for this app, Form Screen 1 and Screen 1. Form Screen 1, whatever is at the top here, is the first screen that will be visible. So whenever you are creating an app, this top screen is the first screen that's visible, and you would have to create navigation, as I have right here, to get myself to this other screen. So if I click right here, I can go to the other screen through a formula. So you can see right here, on select is the property, and this is the formula that it's going to do. It clear collects, which is a way of collecting data, then it navigates to screen 1. So the navigate function is the real big trick here. Where you see the pieces. Now, when you build or customize the forms here, you can do lots of cool things. You have a data source, you get to choose which fields you add in. Down here, you get to choose how many columns you can have. And each card can take up to 4 of these columns. So my form has 4 columns. Each card gets to be anywhere between 1, 2, 3, or 4 of the columns, taking up the whole row. So you can see the different sizes and pieces right here. Each card represents a field. Inside each card, you have star, visible, error message, data card value, and data card key. So you have 4 pieces. The big piece is this thing called data card value. That's where the actual field you fill out is taken care of. So you see that right there. So when you modify a SharePoint form, you modify and add in the fields you want. You set the properties to what you want them to be. And then in the File tab, you save and you publish it back to SharePoint. So publish back to SharePoint. Now, what you do, the formulas you write and all those sorts of things, it does not matter whether you learn them right now in a SharePoint form or whether you learn them in a Power App, it's all the same. So the only real difference between the SharePoint form and a standalone Power App is this section here called SharePoint Integration. SharePoint Integration is simply what happens when I push buttons in SharePoint. So in SharePoint, there's a new item button, and this is what on new does. So when I press the new item button, these are the actions that it takes. If I select an existing item and say edit that item, these are the actions that it takes. So only this difference is really what we see here. If I had built this as a standalone app, it would also work with the same data source, no problem. So it's really just that integration. So I'm going to close this out, and we're going to go back and we'll build an entire app from scratch now. And I'm going to do it really quickly. There's a recording, of course, so you'll be able to rewatch it at some point in the future. So to build an app, first of all, I want to tell you never, ever, ever, ever to press the Create an App button from Power Apps here. Likewise, don't ever start from data. Both of these options will do one thing to your app that you don't want to have happen. When you are building an app, what you want to do is create a Canvas app from blank. So we want to start from a blank Canvas app. And the reason why, whether you do it from the apps page here, or whether you do it from the create box button here, the reason why we want to start from blank instead of from data or from SharePoint is you get to choose the format, tablet or phone. If you start from SharePoint, if you start from data, it will only be phone. You don't get the choice there. And the big problem is if you do phone, you cannot resize the canvas. So you will get a specific canvas size. It's about 1132 tall by 632 or something like that wide. And those dimensions are it. That's all you get. If you choose tablet, you can change the dimensions to anything. So I can make a tablet app look more thin like a phone app. I can make it perfectly square. I can make it whatever dimensions I want by going to the settings tab here and going down here to display. So a Canvas app that is tablet format, you can choose a size and make it whatever you want. If we were doing a phone app, the size button here would just be missing completely, and you're stuck with it there. It will scale to the screen, but the ratio, the almost 2-to-1 ratio of a phone app cannot be changed. You can't do anything about that. So that's where the big problems will come up. So that's why we want to specifically do these tablet apps and not the template apps or the phone apps. And they don't really add a lot in there. It's a nice feature. It kind of gives you a couple things, but it doesn't really help you overall. So here we go. So we have a name for an app. You can change the icon and do other things here. And this is what your app looks like. And apps are basically screens with objects on them. So if I want more screens, I can go right here where it says new screen, and I can build in additional screens. Screens can have names. I like to just use short lowercase letters, and I try to abbreviate things rather than make them longer names, because no one's going to really know what these are. But if I'm writing formulas and I can write HME instead of, home screen, it just makes my life a lot easier. So short and simple is better if you can help it. Now on each screen, I can insert in objects. So the insert tab at the top lets me go and insert in objects. Labels are basically text boxes. You can do whatever you want to with them. They can show information, they can show static text, they can have no text in them and be rectangles with colors to add in bars and such at the top. So I could put a label up here at the top, make it nice and big, delete the text out of it, and then go in this properties pane down to the color and say, oh yeah, I just want a blue bar at the top. Cool. So labels are really, really useful for lots of different things. Buttons allow you to press them and do things with it. So a button is great when you want to press something and do it. Buttons don't have to actually do pressing though, so it's kind of interesting. The difference between a label and a button, buttons can have rounded corners. So if you wanted a label that had rounded corners, you can actually put in a button and change its properties so nothing happens when you click it quickly and easily. Over here, you can insert in edit forms. So if I wanted to connect to a data source, I can put in an edit form here. And then I need to go to the data section and I need to connect to my data. So I can go to the connectors here and I can search for all the different types of connectors I might want, one of them being SharePoint. If I connect to SharePoint, I have to then tell it what site and what list, or lists if I want to connect to multiple. But when I do, and I have that connection, now this form can utilize it. So I can add items to this list from this form. I can edit items from this list from this form. All of that's pretty easy. And again, you'll see it puts all the fields in. With a form, you can go to the fields section, edit and remove or move around different fields you don't want. So if I want different fields to be in different places, I can get rid of them. And I can move them around. If I change the column number, I can then, as we saw before, snap these to take up the space I want them to take up. And you can see you can make them what you want to. The reason to do 4 is so I can do this as 3/4 if that's what I want. And then each of these fields can potentially be customized. If I go to one of these fields and unlock it, I can go into the control and go to any of its properties and make things happen. So every date picker has a default date, but I could say, oh no, let's just default this to today. Quick and easy. Every end date, again, I have to unlock it. Every end date might have something here, but I could put something like if is blank, and will then actually do it today, otherwise end. Now, end is a variable. I just haven't created it yet. When I change start date, there's an on change property. I can say something like if data card value 4 dot select date is greater than data card value 5 dot selected date, then set variable end to data card value 4 dot selected date. Now, all these names are a little tricky to type. Over here, you can rename everything, and everything can be called upon by name. So if I change these things to simpler names like start one and end one, I'll be able to do more with it. So now you can see I can start to make these things more dynamic. When I'm ready to submit the form, that's where a button would come into play. And I can throw in a button and have it, when I press it, tell it to submit form 1. So I press it and it saves a record to the SharePoint list. Now, other things we can insert on the page. We can put in various inputs if you want just static inputs. What you can't do is create new data sources directly in Power Apps, but you can have drop downs to filter, or a date picker to filter, or a text input to type something into search. These can be put in on their own. Over on the right here, sometimes hiding out, you can put in galleries. Galleries can show you your data. So a form lets you fill in your data. A gallery can show you the records in your data. So you can put in different sorts of values and be able to see them here inside of a gallery. And galleries can then be used to trigger updates in forms and things like that as well. So we're running out of time. We want to kind of get to some questions here. As you can see, the whole point of a Power App and these Canvas apps is to put things on the page. You then go up into the formula bar or the properties on the right, and all you're going to do is change the properties using this Power FX language. So it becomes a real simple process. It's the language itself, kind of like how Excel is kind of simple, but yet it's not. The language itself and how to write the proper formulas becomes the next level of knowledge and so forth. So with the few minutes we have left, if there are any questions, I know I went really fast, but that's what has to happen on 30 minutes time. Feel free to ask anything else you'd like, and we'll hear the questions, and I'll go ahead and do my best.
Alrighty, it looks like I'll give them a couple more minutes to put any questions. But we have one from Brittany, and it says here, what is the overall purpose of Power Apps? What business issues can be solved through creating a Power App? We currently use Office 365, but we have never used Power Apps.
I think the best thing about Power Apps is the ability to simplify any sort of business data collection. So right now, when I want to request time off, I have to go into SharePoint, and so I have to know where this SharePoint site is. I have to fill out a form, and I don't really know how SharePoint works, so maybe I press this button here. You can build a Power App that is easy to access. It can be embedded into a team, it can be embedded onto a web page or given as a direct link. And when you open it up, it should act like an app on your phone. You would see the things you need to see, and you would be able to say, oh, I see what's going on here. Here's my requests, and I have navigation here where I can put in new requests, and you would be able to easily go and do the things you want. So think about IT. If you want to do help desk ticket system, you could build something here where people fill out forms to request help, and they could then have a screen where they can go and see the status of their items. On the other end, the IT help desk themselves could have an app where they see pending tickets, and they can select one and take it over, do the work, and then update the ticket directly in an app. So instead of having to rely on different sources, Excel spreadsheets, emails, tasks, and things like that, we can bring them all into a single Power App and create a much easier to access and easier to see and understand interface where data can be easily entered and viewed.
Awesome. Great question, Brittany. And it looks like we have just one more question from Carl. Is a SharePoint list basically analogous to no-frills table in a SQL database or a SQL database?
Basically, yeah. I mean, underneath SharePoint is a SQL server. So a SharePoint list is a really easy way to collect data. The big reason why you might want to choose SQL or a SharePoint as your data source is certain data sources will actually require additional fees. So, SQL is an option, but the diamond means that it's a premium connector. Premium connectors mean you have to pay a per user fee, which could very well be worth it, but might not be for how many people could be using an app in a given month. So SQL Server could also be used, but if you don't want to pay that additional fee, you could use SharePoint as basically a SQL Server and build a list and be able to collect data into it. So lots of different things can be connectors because Power Apps in its own right is somewhat replacing InfoPath, and InfoPath had a long history with SharePoint. It seems natural to say SharePoint's the default connector, the default data source for a Power App, but it doesn't have to be. I even have apps that have literally no connectors. I have one I use for timers for events. All you do is you fill in the little boxes, you press a button and it shows you a timer and it counts down, and it's really great and easy, but there's no back-end data source to that. It's all in the app itself. So you can kind of do whatever you can imagine with these apps.
Awesome. Great question, Carl. It looks like, oh, we have one more from Edward. It says, can you do multi-page forms?
Absolutely. The trick with Power Apps is it's an illusion, kind of like how PowerPoint works. So you could do multi-page forms. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. Every field and every object in Power Apps has a property called visible. So visible is the magic property for so many of these. So here it says true. Now here I have request type, and this is data card value 3. So what I can do is, instead of it just always being visible, I can say data card value 3 dot selected dot value equals bereavement. So if this equals bereavement, it's visible, but otherwise it's not. That same idea can be done with a lot of different things. So one of the ways to do multi-page forms is to have 30 fields on a single form and have buttons at the top or things at the top, and each one you press sets a variable to a 1, a 2, a 3, and the visibility of the first 10 fields are only visible when the variable is 1. Then the second 10 fields are only visible when it's 2. And then the third, tab sets it to a 3, and then we see the final 10 fields. And then the button that submits it's also only visible on tab 3. So you could build what's really just one form, but you're just making people think that they're seeing 3 different pages, when really it's just making things visible, then invisible, then visible again, and invisible. And that can work for a lot of different things. Content types in SharePoint are basically unnecessary, because all I have to do is have a button I press for a certain type of entry, and I can make certain fields visible or invisible. You can have things be dynamic, so US citizen, yes, no. If it's no, then I gotta ask you 3 more questions, but if it's yes, they get to be hidden. So all sorts of stuff happens that way. So visibility gets to be a really big, sneaky kind of key to make things look like fancier stuff's happening, but really it's just making something visible when you need it.
Awesome. Great question, Edward. It looks like we are all good to go. We got a couple of things and very helpfuls, so that's good to hear. But other than that, thank you so much, Ryan. This is a lot of amazing information. If anybody has any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out after the webinar. We will additionally, again, be sharing this recording with you via email. So if you weren't able to attend the entire event, do not worry. We will send you the full video. So if anybody else doesn't have any questions, I just want to thank you all so much for coming, and have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Right,
And
great.
thanks again, Ryan.
Yep.
All righty. Bye, guys.